So I'm just absolutely thrilled to be interviewing Diane Louise Jordan, television and radio presenter. But not only is she a much loved and much respected television and radio presenter, she is also a motivational speaker, an inspirational campaigner, and a highly committed trustee and a patron of many different charities and organisations. So goodness knows she's busy. So we're very lucky to have half an hour of her time today. So it just remains really for me to welcome you, Diane, and I hope you're there and looking forward to having a chat with you. There we are.
I was very tempted to leave my camera off and let you go, where is she?
I would have done. I would have done exactly that, actually. Well, thank you very much for not doing that. It would have been fun. I've got a few jokes up my sleeve if I need to, but it's not always a good way of starting, is it? But thank you for joining us. Me too. Absolutely thrilled that you can join us for a really, really nice discussion today about a subject which I know is extremely close to your heart and has been for several years. I was going to say many years then, but maybe that sounds wrong. But for many years, absolutely committed to this. And if I may say, you're also a very treasured friend of Discovery Education. We're very, very lucky to have been working with you all these years as well. Shall we kick off? I've got a long list of questions, and I'm sure many people on this call will want to ask questions as well, if that's okay. So, and the first one's quite a long one, but I think hopefully it's an interesting one. It has been an extraordinary year, hasn't it? In so many ways, an existential threat, really, that's led to a period of self-reflection, I think, and reevaluation even of our values. Perhaps it's been particularly hard on young people. I'm a father of four teenagers, and I think it's been a difficult time for them, and it's highlighted much inequality and unfairness across society in the UK. So what positive steps from pupils' perspective, from children's perspective, would you like to see happen as our local communities return to whatever normal is? And do you think a cultural rethink could and should come, and how might we do things differently and set a better example for our students? It's a very long question, but I'm keen to know what you think.
Yeah, well, interestingly, coming from a family standpoint as well, I've got 3 grandchildren, and I've seen actually firsthand how this year has really affected them. And I think a lot of teachers will probably have seen this as well. I think there's one group in particular who found it incredibly hard, and they're the children who were in I'm going to talk in old-fashioned language, the 4th year of junior school, which I think is year 6, and having that transition from junior to senior. Those children in particular had that very crucial transition. It's been robbed, it's been taken away. They didn't have a chance to really say their goodbyes. There wasn't enough time for teachers to prepare them for that. And then going into senior school is a big transition anyway. So particularly for some children who go into new environments where everything's new, and not to have that transition has been quite hard. So what I think I've learned from this, particularly this past year, is that life is always going to throw some curveballs our way. We can plan as much as we want to, and it's a good idea to have some sort of planning. But in that planning, I would maybe, now knowing what we've known in this past year, is to really help our students to cope with change and to encourage them to be a bit more resilient in terms, across all areas of their lives. And you're right, there are certain sections of our community for whom this past year has been probably more painful than others. And my understanding is, from the statistics that I've been looking at, that some of the minority communities have felt it particularly hard. So in terms of what can we do in the classroom, I think one of the best tools that we can impart to our young people is the gift of curiosity. To really encourage our young people to think to and to be adaptive, you know, to really try and understand the world, our community, our, you know, right down to what's happening in the classroom from all perspectives, if possible, to encourage our children to maybe stand in the shoes of somebody else. You know, what does it look like from this perspective?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what does it look like from over here? Because depending on where our perspective is, we do see life differently. So I would really encourage them to consider all viewpoints, and adaptability has to be, I think, a key thing in there.
I think I think that's absolutely fascinating, and it reminds me of a conversation I had not long ago, actually, with some fellow teachers, and we were talking about how the curriculum that we had been taught in the 70s, I have to say, and 80s, in some ways has not really changed. And I think at best, I think it was incomplete. I think we're now beginning to see, are we not? It was incomplete at best. I'm being kind. I think perhaps at worst, one might say it had been not exactly censored, but I think it was perhaps subject to some unconscious bias. And how we react to that is interesting, because I reacted to that, first of all, through frustration and anger, actually, but also through curiosity. So I'm so pleased that you said that, because I'm now super curious about the achievements of people in different communities, even in just in the UK, that I hadn't been told about, and I want to know more about.
What do you mean when you say frustration and anger, that you didn't use those terms?
Yeah, that my, well, let's, I'm just going to call it, I'm going to say what it is, in my view, that my position had never really been challenged, and that I'd been made to, I'd become very comfortable. The curriculum was largely about people, perhaps, I won't say like me, but from communities that I recognize, and it was about power. And a lot of, I think I'm coming to the conclusion that my own position had never really been challenged. And so therefore, joining in discussions now, rightly so, about unearthing some of the unconscious bias, perhaps that might have been there, has left me unable to even contribute to that discussion, because I don't have the knowledge that I wished I had. And that's a brutal thing to admit in public here, but I had a good education. I'm not stupid, but I don't feel well equipped. And I'm angry about that I'd like to have been told more about other people's achievements from different communities, because it's so rich. That's why I felt angry. If that makes sense.
It's really interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting, you know, hearing it from your point of view, because my own personal experience, you know, I was a student in the 60s and 70s, right. And you know, it wasn't that long before that we had started this transition from an imperial viewpoint and positioning, right, to where we are in this more modern, right, multicultural Britain. And my history, I knew nothing about. My right. parents in the Caribbean. Not only did I know nothing about a Caribbean experience, my parents, who were educated in the Caribbean, and you know, they were part of the Commonwealth, their education was very British focused. So they learned the same history as I learned. So they knew very little about where they came from as well, which sounds bizarre. And then you know, when all I heard about Africa, for instance, was that, you know, people lived in mud huts. They were, you know, savages. It was such a negative, completely, you know, a really incomplete scenario. And that's what I was fed on. I think it's, I know there are lots of challenges still for teachers today. I know that it's really tricky. I also hope that we can celebrate some of, you know, the journey that we have made, because I think that there's still a massively long way to go. But at least our students are beginning to understand that there are other viewpoints. And particularly, I think, again, teachers have an incredibly brilliant opportunity to, even if we don't have all the answers, we're never going to have all the answers, but at least if we encourage children to even know that there's a possibility of another story, another scenario, then at least they can start exploring, you know, maybe encourage them to be adventurous themselves.
Brilliant.
And we are so blessed with the internet. Now, I'm not saying we've had a year of everybody literally stuck to screens, and here we are still stuck to a screen. So I'm not really advocating more of that in one sense, but if our children are going to be online, use that, you know, encourage them to be explorers, to look to see what happens in, you know, in other communities, both across the world and right on our doorsteps. And I also think because we live in this, you know, this beautifully variegated community now, we have got the teachers have teachers in the classroom who can really, you know, these little people, they can bring so much wealth to our to the classrooms. And you know, by tapping into their life experiences, their cultures, and making them kings and queens for the day, where they come in and they share their life with us and their culture with us. Not only are we all learning, but also we're giving so much honor to that young person and building up something in them that makes them feel, you know, it builds up the self-love in them. Yeah. I spent a lot of my childhood and, you know, a lot of my teenage years having wasted years of having such a negative image of who I am and where I came from. That, you know, there was so much work put in to try and rejig all that negative stuff that I just imbibed because it was everywhere. To have, and it doesn't make you feel that great about yourself, but to have this opportunity where these young people can be celebrated and honored in a real, you know, in an authentic way. Absolutely. Is, I think teachers got more brilliance at their fingertips than perhaps they might.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And to position that, or to begin that discussion with the word curiosity is so wonderful. I'm so pleased that you began with that, because it's such an optimistic position to be in now, because there's so much to find out about, and so much, as you rightly say, within the school itself, which is a microcosm. Many schools are, not all, but many are a microcosm of what's going on outside, as they should be. Well, maybe this gets us nicely into the next point, which to a degree you've already talked about, but we know that you're hugely passionate about equality, diversity and inclusion in our communities. How do you think schools can help to make a fairer, more equitable society? What role do teachers and school leaders play in this important work? And you've kind of touched on that already, really, but what do you think? It's a big ask, but perhaps it's an exciting project as well.
Well, firstly, I think we have to be honest and realistic.
Right.
The world isn't fair. The world's never been fair. And I don't know, we've certainly never been equal. So even if we look in our own families, there's all sorts of dynamics that are going on. There are things that happen in the classroom that I don't know if, I don't know if we'll ever have something called equal, but what we can do is have a kinder place, somewhere that, you know, people feel included and welcomed, and we can do that. I think one of the gifts that a teacher can give, or a school leader can give their students, is the help to navigate a world that may not be fair, to help them navigate how to flourish in a place that isn't fair. And I suppose one of my concerns at the moment is the fact that and it's completely understandable, but I'm hearing more and more about people feeling like victims, you know, people, you know, like me, you know, being triggered because of something that's said that hurts our sensitivity. Now, these are real feelings. You know, people do feel this vulnerable. There is a fragility, and that's a real thing. But how do we help people? How do we help each other to to be strengthened, so that even if the knocks do come our way, that we're able to actually stand up strong and firm. I'm not saying forget fighting against that, but I'm saying alongside that we have. I would love it to see. I'm asking a lot of you teachers, sorry, but you know, for all of us adults, in anybody who has a responsibility for young people, but be that parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, anybody in the community, the educators, to help equip them to be robust enough so that they're not knocked, like, you know, from sideways by all the, you know, all the unfairness.
That is absolutely fascinating, Diane, because it's quite nuanced. It's quite subtle what you're saying, if I may say, because you're neither saying, obviously you're not only saying that the world is and always will be unequal, get used to it. You're not saying that, I'm not hearing that, but neither are you saying that from now we will reset the dial, and because we say it is now equal, and because we value inclusion and diversity, therefore the world is more equal. And some schools, if I may say, I mean, I've been a head teacher and I myself have been guilty of introducing values into the school, constantly repeating those values in assemblies and lessons, and therefore assuming that they are so, that the school is inclusive just because I say it is. And what I think you've done there is what you're saying is very empowering, because you're saying, here's how you can navigate your way through this until it gets much better. Does that make sense? You're not resigned about it.
No, and I'm also saying sometimes we can feel really overwhelmed by how gloomy the world is and how unfair it is. And I know for myself, I've looked at situations and I want to help everybody. I want everyone to have the best life they can be. And I can sometimes have to think, well, what can I do? It's just like this tsunami coming towards me. Well, all I know that I'm responsible for is me. So if I want to change the world, then I need to start with me.
Brilliant.
And I think one of the greatest things that our teachers can do, or our educators can do for young people, is to model the type of world that they'd want to have. And if we can't do it, we're not responsible. The educators aren't responsible for what happens outside the classroom, but they certainly are responsible for what happens within the classroom. And you know, I've been challenging myself with this just recently, because I think that I am so fair, so kind, all these, I just think I'm really the perfect person. And but my colleagues, my husband, my child and grandchildren, they would all, you know, beg to disagree. So but you know, they know, you know, they know I love them, they know I want the best for everybody. But the fact is, I say some things and without realizing it, model something else.
Yeah, that's the point.
And I think this is a note for parents as well as a note for anybody responsible for a child in the classroom. It's so easy, and I say this with the kindest possible way, because it's so, you know, I know what the challenge is. It's much easier to say what we want, to talk about this beautiful world that we want to be part of. And we can turn around and, without even meaning to, humiliate a child in the classroom, not really pay attention to somebody. Sometimes we're at our end, you know, end tether, or whatever the expression is, and you know, we may shout at a child, and then, you know, we might talk too much and then expect them to talk less or to be kind to somebody else. There are so many little things that we do in our classrooms or in our, wherever our environment is, that could make a massive difference to the children that we have in our care, the students we have in our care. So sometimes we look to the curriculum, you know, we think, oh, if only we had more Black history or more, you know, inclusive education or whatever it is, and all of that stuff. Absolutely, we do need challenges in all those areas. But the most critical place is us, and that's that's the hardest place. And I'm not saying, beat ourselves up with it, but be kind, but continually evaluate what we're thinking, what we're saying, how we're responding to perhaps that child in the classroom who's very problematic. And I'll just do a tiny example of what I mean. And this might sound very crude, but and I don't even know if that's still the case now. But I remember when I was at school, a lot of young black boys or a lot of black kids would get into quite a bit of trouble with their teachers because their teachers thought that they were being disobedient because they wouldn't give eye contact. Now that's a cultural thing.
No, that's a good example.
In my culture, you don't give an adult eye contact because it looks as if you're being rude, especially if you're being told off or something. So again, there's a miscommunication. Whereas if a teacher was curious again, like why are you behaving like that, they might get a different outcome. Or if a child is exceedingly quiet, to keep trying to encourage that child to speak in a public arena is probably the worst thing that you're going to do for that child. So it's, I can give loads of examples, but what I'm trying to say is if we're so lucky in a classroom, we probably have no more than about 35 children in a class. So we've got this little ecosphere to really focus and concentrate on, and really think about how every single person in that classroom, maybe always think the best for them, even though they're driving you around the bend. What is it that their behavior is saying about them? If somebody's really jumping all over the place, well, maybe that person, maybe they are a really physical person. How can we engage in that physicality? How can we, I don't know, I loads of examples, but it's just about really seeking to understand those individual people.
I love what you're saying because it's very empowering. I'm still hearing that empowerment piece. There's a lovely quote that was attributed to, it's attributed to Maya Angelou. I'm sure you've heard it many, many times, which is, people may forget what you say, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And teachers, in my experience, I had 21 years as a teacher, and teachers, it's what we do. We never miss an opportunity to help children to feel good about themselves. Any opportunity during the day, you seize it. And I think that's what teachers do. And your approach is very individual. You're kind of saying, aren't you, know the individual. And I wish when I'd been at school, I wish someone had said to me, you can't control what people say. You just can't. There's no point even trying, but you can control how you react. And I kind of heard that in what you were saying, really. Does that make sense?
Yes, and that's also a way of helping to build the child's resilience as well. It's like the world, I don't want to sound like doom and gloom. The world is a tough place. I don't want it to remain a tough place. I will always fight and work and explore how to make it a more beautiful place. While I'm doing that, I need to equip our little people.
That's the point.
So that they can, I want them to be able to think about solutions. How can I navigate this? And also to encourage them to find the joy in discovering this world. This last year in particular, we have been crippled by fear. Right. And everywhere you look, people are even turning off their TVs. I've been speaking to some of my BBC colleagues, and they're saying that adults are not listening, not even listening to the news, let alone watching it anymore, because it's too depressing. It just feels too gloomy. And we're hearing a lot of people talking about their mental health and the stress of young children shouldn't be living with the amount of stress that they have been for the last year. So I'm thinking, well, teachers, you are in a brilliant position to help our young people to come in the opposite spirit. What's the opposite to fear? Love, joy. Like how can we inject joy into the classroom? Yes, that's a challenge. great. How do we, how do we explore it? Whatever,
Absolutely.
I can go
No, but you're so right. And
hold on, can we just stop there? I love it. You're so right.
I'd say if you weren't, but I'd say it very respectfully, but it resonates with me, because what you're saying is, again, I keep using the same word, but you're empowering, you're liberating the children to say, you yourself have some power, you have worth, you matter. But at the same time, and maybe this takes us neatly into another question I wanted to ask you, at the same time as that project, that piece, which is empowering and liberating children themselves, perhaps I would put it to you that we also, there's some work to be done about the curriculum itself, because I know you're not resigned to the idea that, well, life will always be this unequal, and so just get used to it and be resilient. I'm not hearing that from you. So this phrase, unconscious bias, I mean, I've already mentioned it today, and we're hearing it more and more now in social media and in the news and so forth, and in our own circles. I'm just really keen to know what that phrase means to you, and what could we do about that at a macro level. So rather than the individual help and support, which you've eloquently described, what about this curriculum? What about this agenda?
Well, first of all, I think that every human being has unconscious bias.
Right.
Because if you boil it right down to its essence, it's basically when we don't have enough information about another person, our brains take the easy route, and we fill in the gaps. And there's a term for it. It's called cognitive miser. So the brain is like a little miser, it just goes, oh, well, I'm going to save all my thinking, and I'm just going to make an assumption. And so we become in danger of being judgmental about another person, and falling into stereotypes about people. And we do that. Essentially, it comes from that place of trying to make us safe, because we want to make sense of the world. So we all have an element of that in us. I think what you may be referring to is how that plays out in terms of how minority groups are misunderstood or excluded from the wider community. So I do think that education, the curriculum in particular, has a responsibility to address that, and we are light years away from where where I hope we could be. But we are beginning to see flickers of optimism in some of those areas. It's still incredibly slow, and again, I'm speaking from a more personal point of view, just as a point of illustration, but it's not just excluded to this community. Obviously, I'm speaking from the African Caribbean community. That's my experience, and I find it incredible, and I'm saying that politely, that we even have to have something called Black History Month.
It does seem odd.
It's insane to me that we've reduced any sort of learning, understanding, exposure to a month.
Yeah.
And yet that's still better than it was 10 years ago. It's when are we going to have when is life going to be much more integrated and joined up? And I'm one of the reasons I'm here today is because I actually like the work that Discovery does. I like the name even, Discovery. It's all about let's discover. And I really admire that the work that goes on in a lot of schools, because I know that teachers are doing their absolute best with the limited resources that are available to them at the moment. But I think from all walks of life, it's imperative that we actually start taking responsibility for looking at how how we share information. What does that look like? You know, from what foundation are we making these decisions or giving this sort of information? So I think there is a lot of work to be done. I'm very mindful, actually, as I'm saying this, and this is why you're probably hearing me stuttering a bit, because I'm processing
about it.
Well, what I'm actually thinking about is, I do know there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and particularly in this last year, with, you know, all the movements that have happened in terms of really putting this issue, particularly the one of race, to the forefront. We're in danger of some of the very good work that's been done being almost dismissed, the goodwill being dismissed as well. So I don't want people to feel guilty or unnecessarily guilty
for having a go.
Yeah, or feeling disempowered to contribute to find a solution. So but what I'm saying, there's this balancing act, because, you know, there's a really valid point to be made. You know, there are certain groups in this country that have not been represented, certainly through my lifetime. And, you know, each decade you can look at how these groups have been working to find some way of getting becoming much more part of the mainstream, and having this, at least some of the opportunities that everybody else has had. And time again, sometimes I look at it and I think, we're just on this hamster wheel. We just, each decade it tells the same story, and where are we going? You know, I was just looking at on BBC iPlayer, there's a series called Small Acts, and it tells it's a series of stories about the existence and of the Black community in the UK, and most of the stories are quite depressing, because they're all about, you know, people having to fight to find a way to just get to a level playing field. And here we are again saying the same thing. So there are a few breakthroughs. You know, I'm an example of one of those lovely, lucky breakthroughs, but generally we're on this hamster wheel. So so my question is, what do we need to do to go forward? Because if we keep doing the same things that we've done before and expect a different outcome, well, that's just a sign of madness.
It is.
So, you know, so what do we do to go forward?
So can I ask you, I hadn't planned to do this, and you knew we were going to go off piste, but I'd love to just talk to you briefly as a grandmother, if I may. And I can't really believe I'm saying that, but anyway, there we are. Not about your grandchildren, but if you just think of your grandchildren in school, their teachers are faced with a very difficult decision every day for all the students, which is this: they have a curriculum to deliver. They have this propositional established knowledge, we can debate that one, which they have to deliver because the children will be tested on it, and their test scores are important. And as a parent of 4, I think my children's test scores are important, but they have to do that at the same time as pausing and making time to say, wait a minute, how do we know what we know? How do we know that what we know is true? What do you think? So what would you like your grandchildren's teachers to do? Do you know what I mean? Would you like them to make more time? That question sounds a bit facetious. I didn't mean it to sound like that, but I'm interested on your take. Can they take a bit more time?
I think this is why I tried to start at the beginning by talking in a bit more general terms, in terms of how we communicate with each other as human beings. Because I am absolutely aware that for teachers nowadays, it's even harder for a teacher than it was in my day. Because if we were coming out of lockdown in the 1960s or the 1970s, I would be probably saying to teachers right now, do everything you can possibly do to keep your children outside, playing, interacting, away from, you know, sitting still at a, because, and away from a computer for a long time, because they've missed out so much on that human interaction, and which is really critical and under, and sometimes, you know, not valued as much, you know, because I think we're so concerned with them learning facts that we forget about
neck up. Yeah.
them being human beings and all the other ways that you can learn. So, you know, I'd probably start with something like that, but we can't. There's so many things that teachers can't, how tight the curriculum is, and you know, so everybody has this restriction. So within that restriction, I'm really requesting teachers to think about those little individual people and their feelings as a one-to-one as you go through your day. So we can't change the big picture. We can't necessarily right now change the curriculum. I know that there are, I'm working on a project that might be able to feed into that curriculum, and more of that in a minute. But you know, there are qualities that we can bring to the classroom that will make a massive difference, and we overlook some of these qualities to our detriment. So joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, you know, self-control as well, you know, a little bit of gentle discipline, you know, all of these qualities that I can just rail off. But actually, if we thought about it, what does it mean to be a gentle teacher, you know, to have a classroom where you're encouraging each other to be gentle with one another, to be vulnerable with one another. I'll give you another little example. I remember I was at a wedding a few years back, and the vicar, you know, it was a church wedding, and the vicar turned round to the new wife and said to her, "Well, Ali, now that you're married to your wonderful husband, Nick, you've now got to, you know, if you want your marriage to work, you have to drop all of your desires, all of your ambitions, everything, and, you know, put that to the back and focus all your desires, you know, so your priority desire now is making sure everything's wonderful for your husband, you know, for his, you know, for his desires." And I was sitting there thinking, what, you know, like the raging feminist was coming out of me, and I wanted to jump and go, no. And then, so before I was able to lose control, he then turned to the husband and he said, "And Nick, you know, from now on, your priority is to forget all your needs and to really focus on realizing your wife." I was like, right, I get it. Now, but at the time, you know, obviously I wanted to, before I heard the rest of it, I wanted to, you know, throttle it.
You've already gone up.
Actually, yeah, exactly. Come down, Diane. But it was a really good, it's a really good principle, I think, that we can all, maybe apply. And it does take, it does need us to be trusting, vulnerable, and most of us are too scared to do that. But in the classroom, the teacher can create that. She can encourage children to watch each other's back so that they don't have to worry about themselves. And that is a culture. You know, we talked about having a cultural rethink. That's a cultural rethink.
It is.
You know, how do we really interact with each other?
That's lovely. Oh, altruism is not something that we teach much in the formal curriculum, but you're saying certainly that is certainly something that can be worked into the culture and modeled. That altruistic approach, I think, is marvelous. And I'm really keen in the last few minutes, Diane, I'm sorry to sort of move quickly, but I'm really keen just to ask the final one, which is about you're known to have a passion for celebrating multicultural Britain and recognizing the extraordinary achievements of our fellow Britons from a range of different cultures and communities. You've met people all over the country and all over the world from a diverse range of cultures and communities. Why don't you tell us about this passion and your hopes and ambitions for the future? And dare I say, maybe what's in your in tray at the moment? What's keeping you motivated right now? I'd love to know what your ambitions are.
Well, first of all, I truly believe that everybody's great. You know, I believe that we've all got something magnificent inside us. And I'm always trying to find ways to bring that out in people.
Yeah, you are.
And so each and every one of us, we're beautiful, we're fantastic, we're amazing, and we live with all its ups and downs and all its, you know, pimples. We live in a magnificent country, and sometimes we take this, ICE for one take this multicultural community for granted, and quite often we hear about all the sort of, you know, the challenges and the problems. And it was quite interesting because it was just today I was speaking to a friend of mine, and she's Italian, and she's now works and lives in the UK. And she was saying that she's white Italian, and she was saying that one of the things that really encouraged her to come to the UK is our multicultural community, because she has grown up in a monoculture.
Right.
And she was talking about how in that sort of culture, everybody feels restricted. There's just this one way of behaving, and it can be quite limiting. But to come here and to have the variety of people and cultures and tastes and opinions and, you know, everything that we have here is magnificent. So, you know, I sometimes think that we take this gift for granted, the gift of living in a multicultural place. But, you know, we're all unique. We all represent this incredible artist palette. And so I'm working on a project at the moment, which is going to be launched in the autumn, and I'd love to come back and speak more openly with your educators near the time. But essentially, it's an opportunity for people to share their stories, because storytelling is such a powerful way to get to know another person, but to share their stories so that we can move away from having these polarized views that are sort of limiting us and silencing us, to look beyond, you know, the first phase of what we think a person is, to really get to know the person behind the stereotypes. So for us all to share our lives. And I think that's all I can say on that at the moment, but I'm itching to say that. And I'd love to come.
That's going to be so helpful and so useful and so exciting for the curious teachers out there, and beginning with that curiosity. There's nothing like a good story, you know, and it's empowering, isn't it, to give each individual the opportunity to tell their story. Wow.
Yeah. And I think the project will have the well, we've got ambition for it, and I'm sure it will sit in all of your curriculum. So I'd really love to share that with you.
It sounds so optimistic, and I expected that from you. I think you're known for your love and your optimism. I've admired you for many years in all the stuff that you've done in television and radio, and much loved. And I expected to finish this interview feeling better than I did at the beginning, and more optimistic and more joyful. And that's exactly how I feel. And I'm sure everybody on the call does too. So thank you for that. What a joy.
It's a pleasure. But I hope that I hope that within all the optimism that I've been able to give some practical application for your educators to take into their classrooms. So
most
I'm
definitely.
really hoping that.
Most definitely you have. I found it very empowering, actually. Thank you so much. I wish we could go on. But
absolute honor. So thank you. I'll be back.
Please do, when you can tell us more about this amazing project that you're obviously working on. It sounds superb. It's just what we need.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Brilliant.
All right, and I'll see you soon. All right. Bye. Bye.
Thank you, Dan. Wow, that was just so insightful and so interesting, as I knew it would be. An awful lot in there to think about. A very empowering discussion, and a very optimistic one too. Wasn't Dan brilliant?